I think that the secularization of society has really divorced people from what used to be a fundamental understanding was that you will suffer and that there's a redemptive quality to suffering.
100%. And that was also Jordan Peterson. Well, he's completely disappeared off the map because of health difficulties, but he was kind of waning in popularity, I think, anyway, in a lot of circles. But the reason he became so popular in the first place was, I can't remember exactly how he phrased it, but it was something along the lines of like, the one reality that can't be argued in life is suffering. It's like you can argue with, happiness and joy because unfortunately it is the way of the world that there are many lives that see very little of those things. But you won't find a human who hasn't suffered in some way. We all suffer in different ways and to varying degrees. But you won't find a person, yeah, who hasn't suffered. And you do. I think it's interesting you were tied to secularization because I think that's right, which is that there has been. It's obviously intrinsic to sort of Christian and certainly to Catholic belief and worldview because, and I'm phrasing it this way because not just because that's what we are, but that's sort of the basis of the societies that we live in. That yeah, suffering is a part of life, and so that reality was just accepted. Whereas since sort of secularization has really run its course in the Western world, there were interesting comments from a bishop up in Scandinavia where he essentially said secularization has run its course at this stage. There's nothing left to secularize. He was saying that over the weekend, and I think he's right about that. I think the sort of new axis upon which a lot of us operate is that it's not so much to orient yourself towards the good or orient yourself towards a good. It's more so that suffering is to be avoided at all costs. That is, I think, a huge part of the assisted suicide push. I think that uh both as you outlined personally, you've experienced the difficulties people go through with the suffering people go through with sort of terminal cancer diagnoses. Both experience family members suffering as a result of these things and dying. Nevertheless, you can still make a case that this is not the way you respond to that. And indeed, I think it's most telling, and this was the case in Slovenia as well. Doctors were overwhelmingly opposed to the introduction of this because they believe that what's required instead is better palliative care. And that's the same in Ireland whenever you have input from physicians or anyone like this. So I think it's a really interesting contribution Slovenia has made to what is ultimately an international indirect conversation going on.
I think often what happens with certain laws like that is what starts off as an option can often become an expectation where it's like, well, you're suffering, you have the option to end your life. And they're calling it like medical assistance in dying. I think it's a very kind of a, sugar-coated way to say
Euphemistic.
you're killing someone. Just because they're going to die anyway, I'm going to die anyway. You're going to die anyway. That doesn't mean that like it's okay to kill me today or tomorrow. But look, I think that in many, many ways, people are being inoculated against the human experience. I think that we are trundling towards a weakness. I think that we're becoming weaker. And I think also that, if increasing numbers of people who are suffering with difficult, complicated, and indeed terminal illnesses end up opting for assisted suicide, assisted dying, will that not also stifle medical progress? Do you know what I mean? Will the urge to try and make discover medical breakthroughs in order to alleviate those kind of situations and ultimately with a view to trying to cure them, will that not kind of fall off a cliff a little bit if it's like, well, look, this is kind of easier, lads?